Can you hear me, students? Okay, fine. Good morning, all of you. So let us continue from where we left yesterday. Yeah, okay, fine. So I was telling you on Thursday. Yeah, on Thursday's class, in the Thursday's class, we were discussing about the 14 rules of conceptual dependencies, right? So basically, there are 14 rules where we stopped here. So I was telling that there are different rules for representing a conceptual dependency, and we were discussing about the last rules. So if you want to represent a place of a conceptual dependency where one conceptual dependency occurred on the place of another, then we use the 14th rule, right? So I heard a frog in the woods, so woods is the place, and I was here, I heard a frog, so I am trans the object is frog, and I told that it's a frog. Basically the ears are telling it to the processor, the conscious processor or your mind. So that is why the recipient is the conscious processor and the source is your ears. So if you say mtrans and the source and recipient, if you describe like this, so in this case, it will mean hearing, right? But if you write M trans, the frog, and the source and recipient are eyes and the mind. So in that case, you are seeing. So M trans definition will also change depending upon the source and recipient. For example, in the case of A trans also, if you write A trans, then A trans is the action that can mean either giving or taking. For example, in this case, if you see here in the seventh rule, it is basically John A trans the book, and the source is Mary and the recipient is John. So that means he is receiving the book, right? So John took the book from Mary. Similarly, if you exchange the roles here, suppose you write Mary in place of John and John in place of Mary. So in that case, it would mean that John gave the book to Mary, right? So the definitions of A trans and the different primitive actions depends upon the full conceptual dependency realization. So when full conceptual dependency you write, then the whole meaning comes out correctly, right? In the case of M trans, the frog, so here your source is eyes, so it is seeing. In the case the source is ears, it is hearing, right? So that's how you define different conceptual dependencies depending upon the full conceptual dependency. When you represent, then only you are able to understand the complete sentence correctly. So these were the different set of rules. Now let us try to represent a sentence using conceptual dependency notation. So this first sentence is very easy actually. This we have already done in the when I was explaining you the rules. Rajesh got a book from Shweta, right? So this is very simple actually. You just have to use the source and recipient that one dependency, source and recipient dependency. So your source is basically Shweta and recipient is Rajesh. So you take a recipient dependency and put the source as Shweta, and the upper one in the dependency will be Rajesh because upper one indicates the recipient. Right. Now, you have to represent the other part of the sentence also, that Rajesh is giving, basically taking the book from Shweta. So that means Shweta is giving the book to Rajesh. So you can also write it like this, that Shweta A trans the book and the recipient is Rajesh and source is Shweta. So in that case, Shweta is giving the book. So it's basically the same meaning. Rajesh got a book from Shweta or Shweta gave the book to Rajesh. So it's the same meaning. So here we are actually representing that Shweta gave the book to Rajesh. So, so this is the conceptual dependency representation for this sentence. Now, let us take another example. John ate a frog. So, this is a sentence which you want to represent in a conceptual dependency notation. John ate a frog, right? So, for eating, what should be the primitive action associated with it? So for eating, you have ingest, right? So ingest is the primitive action for eating. So then you use ingest. So John ingest and the object is frog, right? So John ingests the frog, and here we are making it more clear. We are making the sentence more clear by writing the source and recipient of this particular ingestion action. So we are also attaching a source and recipient relationship along with this primitive action ingest, just to make it more clear that what is he actually doing. Okay, so ingest is basically the destination will be mouth only, and the source will be some particular position y. Okay, so that frog is at some particular position y, and the destination is it is in the mouth, right? So that is why we have used the destination relationship here. So if you see here, which rule we have used? We have used the rule, the ninth one. Okay, because here the physical location is changing, right? Physical location of frog is changing. Initially it is at location y, and then it is in the mouth. So that location is changing, so that is why we have used the ninth rule, which is telling us the physical destination in the case when your destination is changing, right? In the case when it is two persons involved and one is the source, other is the recipient of that object, then you will use the seventh rule. Okay, so that is why we are using the ninth rule in this case. So the ninth rule says you have a destination, and the upper part of this dependency represents the destination, and the lower part represents the source, right? Source location, and the upper part is the destination location. So let us try to represent the sentence. So John ingest, the object is frog. So John, and then a double-sided arrow to ingest, because double-sided arrow means it is basically a connection between a picture producer and a primitive action and an action. So double-sided arrow, and then P we have placed on this arrow. This P is indicating past tense. So John ate, okay, and the object is frog. Now to make it more specific, we are also using the destination, that dependency rule number 9, and we are telling that it is the initially this object was at the location y, and now the destination is it is in the mouth. So that one we have made it more explicit by using this rule number 9 here. And one more thing, students, here, that we also basically tell the instrument with which he ate. Okay, so that also we are making explicit here, the instrument with which he ate. So that is why we are using the instrument dependency also. So if you see there is an arrow, and on the arrow we have written I. So that is the instrument. So now with the instrument with which it is performed. So instrument is hand only because it is performed by the hand only. There is no spoon, you are eating by the hand. Okay. So the instrument is hand only, and whenever we use the instrument dependency, we cannot use directly the object with which you are eating. We cannot use directly the instrument. We have to provide a full conceptual dependency, right? So what we are doing here is, again we are writing a dependency which is representing a part of this sentence, and it is also saying that John basically, so what it is saying, that John moved the hand. So John and move, there is a dependency, and the object is hand. So John moved the hand and from the position Y to the mouth. So basically that is why we are using the destination dependency again, right? The rule number 9. So destination dependency, that means rule number 9. So that says that the location was initially Y, and now the location is mouth of the hand also. So this, the object for this dependency is hand. So we are talking about the hand. So initially hand it is at position Y, and then now it is in the mouth, right? So this means that John moved his hand from a particular position Y and towards the mouth, to the mouth basically. So John moved his hand from Y position to mouth, and this was the instrument with which he performed, that means the hand. And then what did he do with it? John ate the frog. Okay, so John is moving the hand also from position Y to mouth, and frog is also moving from position Y to mouth. So he's eating basically. So that makes a complete sentence as the as this, that John ate a frog. So basically two things we are making more explicit here. One thing is that frog is at location Y, and finally it is at in the mouth. And the other thing which we are making explicit is the instrument with which we are eating, right? So John ate the frog with the hand. So that one we are making more explicit in this sentence using the instrument dependency. So that rule we have used. And in the instrument dependency, if you remember, in the last class we had discussed all the rules, and I was telling you that if you have a particular instrument, then if you want to represent it through a dependency, let's see that rule. Let's see that rule. See rule number 8. Just see rule number 8. John ate ice cream with a spoon, right? So in this case, John ingest ice cream. The object is ice cream, and the instrument is with a spoon. So we have not directly written the spoon, right? We have used the full conceptual dependency that John did something with a spoon, right? So we cannot write directly only the instrument. We have to write basically the full conceptual dependency. I mean the conceptual dependency also along with it. So that is why in this case also we have written that John moved hand. John moved hand, and then because that hand is the instrument, so John moved hand, and then we are also specifying that from the same location Y up to the mouth. So that is also we are making it more clearer. So this particular kind of dependency, this is basically the dependency representation for this sentence, John ate a frog. So double-sided arrow means you are talking about a relationship between a, that means rule number 1 basically. Just see rule number 1, it is double-sided arrow between a PP and an action, picture producer and action. So same thing here also, present it like a double lines between the two arrows. So between the double-sided arrow, so that I have represented only a single line between both the sides of the arrow, but it is the same thing. It's rule number 1 only. Okay, so ingest is your action involved over here, right? P is indicating your past tense. So John ate, the object is frog, and its source and destination has changed, and we are doing it, the instrument with which we are eating is a hand. So we have written the conceptualization for that one also. Okay, so this is one representation for this sentence. Okay, so this is one representation for this sentence. This is for this sentence. Now let us see some other sentence and try to see that what can be the CD representation for a third example. So first of all, I would like to tell you that there are some tenses also involved in a conceptual dependency. For example, if you want to represent past tense, you use P over the arrow. If you want to represent future tense, you use F. If you want to represent a transition, something is changing its state, so you can use a T for that. And if you are indicating a start of a transition, for example, it is starting the change, the plants are growing, but they are actually growing, that is not still complete. It's not that plants grew. So the question that somebody was asking in the last class, that if you want to represent the plants are growing, so it's a basically start of a transition, so that you can represent through TS, or otherwise you can represent it through K also. K also means continuing. So if it is a continuous tense, you can represent it using K. K means it's a continuing action. Then finished transition, if you want to indicate finished transition, you can indicate by TF. So that means that a particular state change has happened in the past. Okay. So finished transition means TF is a symbol, and TF means that the transition has already happened in the past. That means it is that action is already over, right? So and continuing is K, and then you have interrogative. So if you want to if you want a sentence is like a question, suppose a sentence is a question, so in the end there is a question mark in the sentence, so it's an interrogative sentence. So in that case, if you want to represent an interrogative sentence using a conceptual dependency representation, so you can use a question mark for that. Slash means negative. Negative means if you want to say something, some in some negative sense. If you want to indicate something, something negative, so in that case you can use a slash. Slash means a negative. For example, if you want to represent height is less than -10, something like that. So basically, you can use this slash operator over that in place of that minus, and then you can represent that it's a negative sentence. It's a negative thing. It's a negative value, or even a negative action. Okay, so that you can, if it happened, then you can represent it using a slash. Nil means present. If it's in the present, then you can write a nil, because if you don't write anything, by students, can you hear it now? It is okay, I think now. Okay, fine. 1 minute, I'll present it again. Yes. So basically, what I was explaining was that if you are wanting to represent a timeless action, not dependent upon the present tense or past tense, it's a timeless action. You can use a delta symbol for that. And if you want to represent a conditional action, okay, a dependency which is conditional means A, a got occur. It is not that that event, if you have described the event, it is definitely going to happen. So if you say an if then else statement, it depends upon that if that condition is satisfied, then that action will happen. Okay, but actually it's not necessarily that that action will happen. It might happen. So in that case, you use a conditional symbol. Conditional symbol means that if you are basically trying to represent a conceptual dependency in which one dependency is causing the other, but it may cause or it may not cause the other. So in that case, it's a conditional symbol which you write over that dependency. So we will see that one also. How do we do it? But actually, these are some of the symbols which you use to represent more clearly the sentences. Let us see another example. Let us see another example. Uh, so in this example, you have the sentence, since smoking can kill you, I stopped. So this is a sentence in which one action is that if one is smoking, then it can kill that person, right? So this is one sentence which we are trying to represent, that smoking can kill a person, right? Now, because of this, that smoking can kill a person, I have stopped. So basically, one dependency is that basically two dependencies are, one is smoking and the other thing is that it will kill. So they are dependent on each other. Smoking will kill you, and because of this particular sentence that smoking can kill a person, I stop. So that is another action which is because of that smoking can kill a person. So smoking can kill a person is one action. I mean one sentence. Because of that, I stop. So that is another sentence, right? And smoke, since smoking can kill you, so that is also made up of two conceptual dependencies basically, right? Why? Because one dependency would say that one is smoking, other dependency would say that one is killed, and they are dependent on each other. That means if the person is smoking, then he can get killed, right? And because of this complete dependency, the other thing which could result is that I stop. Okay, so that is why we have this a little bit complex dependency over here. So here you have, if you see the first part of this dependency, it is representing the sentence that one is smoking. Okay, so one is the person basically, and the action is ingesting, and the object is smoke, right? And the recipient is that person. You are saying a general word for that person, one person, and the source is cigarette. So the smoke is the object, and the source of smoke is always the cigarette only. So that is why we have placed the source as cigarette, and the recipient is the person. So this complete dependency means that one, that means any general person, one person, one ingests the smoke from the cigarette, right? So basically, one is taking the smoke from the cigarette. That is the first part of this diagram is representing, right? Now, if you see, you have the last part. Just see the below diagram, the last one, that the lowest one. One is basically the person, and it's a past tense which is basically happening, and the initial state was alive, and now he is dead. So it's a state change. So if you represent the state change, you have to use which rule? Just see the rule which you have to use for a state change. So see here, the state change is basically 11th rule, Bill shot Bob. So you have two dependencies and then an arrow which is linking the two dependencies, right? And it's an arrow with the three lines in it. So the dependency which is pointed to by that arrow, that is the cause, and the result is the dependency which is pointing towards that other dependency. So using this, let us formulate that. So one is basically alive initially, and then he's dead, right? So, okay, so this is not the dependency. 1 minute. Rule number 11 describes the one dependency that is the cause of another. But we want a dependency which is describing the state change. So that is rule number 10, not 11. Okay. So that was a confusion here, students. Rule number 10, the plants grew. So this is a dependency which indicates a state change, right? So the below part you indicate the original state, and the upper part in the dependency you indicate the new state, right? So the object comes on the left hand side. So now you use this 10th rule to depict the state that one is dead. Basically, one is initial state is alive and the final state would be dead. So that means that one can get killed. One will be killed basically. One got killed basically. So one is ingesting the smoke, and the other dependency says that one is killed. Okay, one is killed. One is dead basically. So one is the cause of another. One dependency is the cause of another. So that then now we have to use rule number 11. So rule number 11 is basically the rule which says the relationship between one conceptualization and another that causes it. So the causing dependency is written on the top, and the dependency which is the result, that is written on the below of that arrow, right? So now let us use this. So you have one dependency, that is the first one, which is saying that one is ingesting the smoke. Other dependency is one is killed, right? So both are linked together by the causal relationship. So you can say that there is a arrow from the below dependency to the top one dependency. Why the arrow from below to top? Because below dependency is indicating that he is killed, so that is the result, and the reason is that he was smoking. So basically that is a top dependency. So that is why this rule number 11 is used to depict the relationship that one dependency is causing the other. Okay, so now why have you placed this C over here? This C on this arrow. See, if you see here, there's a C on this arrow, right? So the C is a basically conditional operator. Just now I told you that C is basically a conditional operator, right? So conditional operator means that it may cause or it may not cause. Okay, so one will be killed, that result may happen or may not happen. So basically, if one is smoking, that can kill you. It is not necessary that it will kill you. Okay, so that is why we have placed a C over there just to represent the word that it can kill you. Basically, can word. That it may be possible that you will get killed, but it's not always the case that everybody who is smoking he will get killed only or he will be dead only. That is not always the case. So this C will represent that it's a conditional operator. So it may happen that you will get killed. So this complete thing, one ingests smoke and then it is causing one to be dead. So it's basically representing the first part of the sentence that smoking can kill you, right? Now the second part of the sentence is, since this first part is correct, I stopped. So first part you have represented. Now you have to represent the second part of this sentence. So second part of the sentence is I stopped. So I stopped because of this complete thing, right? So this complete thing is basically the reason for me to stop. So that is why I have written a causal relationship, or you can say rule number 11 I have to apply again, right? Rule number 11 says the relationship between two dependencies, which is one is causing the other. So again you apply rule number 11, and now the below dependency will represent that I stopped, and the dependency to which this arrow is pointing, that will represent this complete first part of the sentence. Okay, so this horizontal dependency, if you see here, the vertical causality link, that means this link which is there between the dead and alive dependency and the ingest and smoke dependency, the link which is there, that means a 3-line arrow which is there, that is a vertical causality link on which you have placed the C operator, right? So that is a vertical causality link. So that vertical causality link indicates that smoking can kill one. Since it is marked C, we know that it can kill one, but not necessarily, right? Now we have the horizontal link. So this horizontal causality link indicates that it is the causality that is making me stop smoking. Okay, so now I will represent the sentence that I stopped smoking. So let us now represent the sentence I stopped smoking. So here you are representing I stopped smoking. So I is a picture producer. So object, I ingest smoke. So smoke is your object, and the recipient is I, and the source is cigarette. So smoking is basically always from the cigarette, and recipient is that person itself. So in this case it is me. So I ingest the smoke from the cigarette, and the recipient is me. So this is what I am representing. So this part of the this complete dependency says that I am smoking, right? The object is smoke and I'm receiving the smoke. Basically, I'm smoking. But now, one thing important which you note here is we have placed a symbol TFP there. Okay, on this action, ingest action, we have placed a symbol TFP. Okay, so if you see what is this symbol TFP meaning attached to this dependency, so the symbol between I and ingest TFP, which we have placed between I and ingest, that symbol means that this action has happened in the past. Okay, basically, and this action has finished in the past. Just see here, the tense TF means finish the transition. So I ingest, that particular action is over. Okay, and P is the past tense. So that means that particular action is over in the past. So this complete sentence, if you use the TFP operator here, the TFP tense over here, so it will actually mean that I stopped smoking in the past. Okay, because TF means that the transition is finished. That means I was smoking, but that is finished. And P means past tense. So that means it's already finished in the past. So that means I stopped smoking. right? So if you see the symbol TFP indicates that smoking has stopped. Okay, ingest means you are ingesting the smoke only, right? So it's basically the smoking action only. So that's why we are saying that smoking. Otherwise, it is ingesting the smoke. So, but it's basically smoking only. So this TFP indicates that smoking has stopped, and the stopping has happened in the past because you are using a P also. So TF means the transition has finished. P means in the past. So that is why the transition, that means the action of ingesting the smoke, that is finished in the past. So that actually means that I stopped smoking. So this complete sentence is representing that I stopped smoking, and the above two dependencies, the complete link, the vertical causality link, and the complete two dependencies, they were representing that smoking can kill you. So now when you relate the two using the horizontal causality link between these two, then it means that complete sentence that since smoking can kill you, I stopped. Okay. Are you able to get this, students? This conceptual dependency representation? Is it okay? Is it okay, students? Shall we continue?
Ma'am,
Yeah.
can't this second which you wrote over here, ingesting, like he stopped smoking, can't that also mean that he smoked a cigarette?
What? What did you say in the last?
Can't it also mean that he smoked a cigarette in the past, and that doesn't mean that he left it, but he just smoked it like previous to maybe yesterday?
So he's okay. So basically, see, conceptual dependency representation is not a very exact representation. Okay, so I would like to tell you this thing, students. It's a very subjective representation. It is not that it will tell you everything very exactly. So in this case, it is representing that. So if you see here, normally it will represent that I was ingesting the smoke. That means I was smoking, and that was happened in the past, right? So it can, so the thing that you are saying, Abhishek, so basically in your case you are saying that he was smoking 1 or 2 days before, but now he is not smoking, so that is also meaning the same thing, that he smoked before, right? But actually if you see the complete dependency with all its parts of the sentence, then it will mean that it's a habit which you are stopping. It's not that an action which was happened in the past, it's a habit which is stopped. Why? Because you're relating the two sentences, since smoking can kill you. So it's basically when you take the complete sentence meaning, the meaning will come out like that. Okay. But if you use this in isolation, suppose you write only this sentence, this dependency, I TFP ingest, O smoke, R I cigarette, that means that part of the dependency. So in isolation, it would not mean the same thing. Okay, so when you take the complete representation and when you are taking a horizontal causality link, then their sentences are linked. So then the meaning comes out that I have stopped that habit actually. Okay, but if you take this sentence in this dependency in isolation, IATFP and just smoke like this, then it will not mean that it's a habit. It can mean the way you are telling also. Okay, that means I was ingesting in the past, that means 1 or 2 days before, now that action has stopped. Okay. So conceptual dependency representation is not a very exact representation. One thing I would like to tell you, students, it depends upon the complete sentence first of all. So uh, if your complete sentence is represented using a conceptual dependency, then the meaning comes out more clearly. So basically it depends upon the complete context, then only the meaning comes out more exactly. Otherwise it will mean differently. So we have certain primitive actions, but we don't have all the primitive actions for each and every action which exists in the world, right? And we don't have all the conceptual tenses also which exists in the world. So we have taken only these 10, 11 tenses only, right? So these can represent only a limited amount of information. So we don't have that much explicit, or you can say a very large vocabulary for representing everything symbolically. So that is why it is not a very exact representation which can represent every sentence uniquely. It depends upon the context. Okay, but here of course TFP means that it's a transition which has that means ingesting is finished. That means he's not eating anymore. It was I mean he's not ingesting the smoke anymore. That is finished, and that is finished in the past. So that means it was like he has stopped that activity in the past only. It's not that he stopped just now. It is stopped in the past only. But of course it could mean like this, that he stopped smoking 2 days back or 1 week back, like this also. But according to this sentence representation, it's a habit which has stopped because it's a transition. Okay, so that's why we have transition also. You can attach this to TF option, which is a transition, right? So TF is basically meaning a transition which has stopped in the past. Okay, so it's not a normal action, it's a transition. So generally when transitions we use, then we use them with the habits only. Otherwise we could use a simple P also for indicating a past tense, right? So for in your case, if you represent the smoking, I was smoking in the past, that means I smoked in the past. Let's say I smoked on the previous day, then I can simply use P. But it's a transition, so it's basically transition means the habit which is changing, and that habit changed in the past. That is why TF is also making it more clearer. So in this case, TF is making it more clearer, but of course it depends upon the complete context of the sentence also. Okay, so Abhishek, in your case, I think if you use only P, then also you can represent that sentence, that I smoked 1 day before, isn't it? Yeah, so basically in place of TFP, you can use only P if you want to represent the simple sentence that I smoked, right? But you are indicating a habit, that is why you are using a transition symbol, TF. So that is why this TFP is making it more explicit that it's a habit which is stopped, right? Because it's a transition which has happened. But otherwise, it depends upon the sentence context also. So this was about conceptual dependency, students. Now we come to scripts. Okay, so this is the second part of strong slot and plus structures. First part was conceptual dependencies, and now we talk about scripts. So what is the difference between a conceptual dependency and a script? Script is basically one thing which is very important in scripts is conceptual dependencies are used for representing the natural language sentences, but the events that they describe, they are actually unrelated to each other. They are independent events in a conceptual dependency. So suppose you say that here you want to represent, since smoking can kill you, I stop. So there are three independent actions or three independent sentences, and you are linking them through these vertical causality links and horizontal causality links, right? So these are actually independent actions or independent events. One event is, one is smoking, other event is it killed the person, the third event is I stopped smoking. Now how you are relating them, right? So the events are not related, you have to explicitly relate them to each other. But in the case of scripts, scripts basically, the events in a conceptual dependency occur in isolation with each other, but scripts actually have this mechanism to link the events. So that is the main concept of scripts. In scripts, we have the mechanism to link the events. So they are similar to frames only, but they used to represent commonly occurring experiences, such as if you are going to a cinema or if you are visiting a doctor, then you can create a script for that, which will tell you the set of events involved in this particular story. Going to a cinema, visiting a doctor. So you can create a script for that. We will see how we create a script for that. But actually, what is a script? Script is a stereotyped, it's a structure which describes a stereotyped sequence of events in a particular context. Sequence of events means one event is causing the other. So real world events generally have a causal relationship with one another, right? One event is causing the other. So generally what happens in scripts is we have certain set of events which describe that story, okay? And the events in the scripts, though they form a giant causal change, a causal chain. So that causal chain means that one event is causing the other, other is causing the third one is causing the fourth one, and so on. So basically, each of the events are linked to each other through a causal relationship, right? So that events which are linked together, they are basically described as script format. So script is used to describe the events which are related to each other. Okay. So what happens in this chain, which is a causal chain, in entry is this chain starts with a set of entry conditions which will enable the first event of the script to get activated. Now the first event of the script gets activated when its entry condition is fulfilled. Then that event will actually cause another event to get activated after it finishes. Okay, so the second event will get activated, then that second event will cause a third event to get activated, and so on. So the end of this causal chain would be the results, which will enable some later script to get activated. So a script can contain multiple events. All these events would be related to each other. So one event will cause other will cause a third one. So basically, when you want to start the script, you have to fulfill a set of entry conditions. When the entry conditions are fulfilled, the first event in the script will get activated. Now, when that event is done, then the second event will get activated, and so on until all the events in the script are over. Now, when all the events in the script are over, the script will generate certain results, and these results are basically the end of this causal chain in that script, and that may also cause some other script to get activated. So the one script describes one event. One event is one story. Let us say, like I'm visiting a restaurant, or I am going to a doctor, or I'm visiting a cinema. So basically, all the events involved in visiting a cinema that will form one script, right? And all the events involved in visiting a doctor that will form another script. Okay, so it may happen that one script after completion and after it gives the results, that may also activate some other script. For example, if I say that if I say one script is visiting a doctor, other script is other script is other script is you can say that doing yoga. So one script is visiting a doctor, other script is doing yoga. So you can say that these two scripts are basically the scripts where the result of one script can lead to the activation of the other script, right? Because if you are visiting a doctor, the doctor may advise you after all the prescriptions and after all the testing and all, he may prescribe you to do some health exercises, right? And that may actually lead you to do a yoga. So that yoga script can also be there, which is having certain events in it itself. Doing yoga means it will have certain events, so it will also be a script. So that visiting a doctor script can actually activate the doing the yoga script. So in this way, I'm saying that there can be multiple events in a script, and after finishing one script, your results can enable the other script to get activated. And one more thing which is very important in the case of scripts is that if the event in a story is not explicitly mentioned, then also scripts can actually tell you that whether that event occurred or not. Then also scripts can tell you whether that event occurred or not using a using the script basically. So basically, scripts are very useful in telling you whether the event occurred or not for those events which are not explicitly mentioned in a story. Okay, so suppose there is a story given to you. In that story, it's not explicitly mentioned some action or some event, and then the question asked to you is whether that event occurred or not. So basically, if you have a corresponding script, if you have a corresponding script for that particular story, then you can refer to that script. And if your script has got activated normally, then all the events in the script will occur normally. So the event which is missing and not explicitly mentioned in the story, that event will also occur normally if the script is got activated normally, right? So then you can predict that that event has also occurred. So even the events that have not been explicitly mentioned in a story, that can be implicitly described using a script, and you can say that yes, that event occurred. So main use of scripts is to predict the occurrence of events that are not explicitly mentioned. Okay, that is a main use and a very important point of scripts. Another important use of scripts is to build a coherent comprehension from a series of unrelated observations. For example, you have been given some particular story in which the events are occurring unrelated to each other. You don't know that whether the events are forming a causal chain or not. One event is causing the other or not. So basically, if you have a corresponding script for that particular story, then that script will help you to understand that yes, these events are related to each other, and these events are causing the other events. So basically, if you have a corresponding script for that particular story, then that script will help you to understand that yes, these events are related to each other, and these events are causing the other events. So basically, if you have a corresponding script for that particular story, So in case you have unrelated events which are there in a story, you can relate them using a script. Okay. So these are the 3 points basically. The first point is that script basically describe a causal relationship between the events. The other point is scripts describe the events which are not explicitly mentioned in the story. So that also can be predicted using the script, whether it occurred or not. Other thing is to describe to basically build a more understandable representation of the series of events which occur if you have unrelated events. So this is an introduction to scripts. Now there are different components of a script. So we have 6 components of a script, entry conditions for a script. So if you want a script to get activated, you have to fulfill some entry conditions. For example, if there is a restaurant script, somebody is wanting to go to a restaurant, right? So the entry condition would be that the customer who is wanting to go, he should be hungry, right? And he should have money. Otherwise, nobody will entertain you in the restaurant, right? So you should be hungry and you should have money. These are the 2 prerequisite conditions for getting activated the restaurant script. Otherwise, the restaurant script will not get activated because you cannot enter the restaurant also. Nobody will actually entertain you, right? So these are the entry conditions for activating the restaurant script. Then tracks. Tracks are basically the particular, you can say a more specific version of a script. For example, a restaurant can be a coffee shop, it can be a food court, it can be a burger outlet, it can be an ice cream parlor. So these are basically different variations of the more general name restaurant, right? So for a restaurant, a more general name, it's a restaurant, but specific version would be a coffee shop or whether it's a food court or what is it exactly. So that is called as a track. Then you have result. So result is the post condition of the script. So when you are completed the script, whatever is the result, that is your whatever is the event which is there, that is your result. What is your result after executing the script? For example, in a restaurant script, the result would be that the customer is basically pleased. He got a good food, so he is now pleased, and he has paid for the food, so he has less money now, right? So these could be the 2 post conditions after the script gets over. So these are called as a result. So there are 2 things which are very important: entry conditions of a string and the result of the string. Track is basically a more specific name of the general script. For example, for a restaurant script, it's a general name, but you can have more specific names like a coffee shop, etc. Then props. Props is basically the inactive participants in the script. For example, if there is a restaurant script, the inactive participants would be the table, the chair, the menu. Can you hear me, all of you? Yes or no? Hello? Okay, fine. So, okay, fine. So what I was explaining was props. So props is basically the inactive participant in the script. For example, yeah, okay. For example, things which are involved in the restaurant script. So these are inactive participants. So they are called as props. Props are supporting items. Supporting items in the script. What people involved? What people are involved? A customer would be there, a waiter would be there who would serve you the meal, right? A cashier would be there to whom you will make the payment, right? There a chef will be there who will prepare the food for you. So these are the people who are involved in this particular story of a restaurant script. So these are the people who are involved in the script. So what restaurants give basically? Yeah. So what is a people involved in the restaurant script? For example, customer, waiter, cashier, chef. All these are basically the people involved in the restaurant script. So what is a restaurant script? Basically, a person is going to a series of events involved with a person. So, what are the actions involved where a person visits a particular restaurant? So, that becomes a script. So, that we are calling as a restaurant script, right? So, the roles would be the people involved, whatever events are involved. So, whatever events are involved in the restaurant script, those are called as the scenes. For example, you are entering a restaurant, then you are ordering the food, then you are eating the food, then finally you are paying the bill. So all these are the events involved in the restaurant script. So these are called as the scenes. Scenes are basically the actual sequence of events which are happening in any particular script. And okay, one thing, voice is voice was breaking. Now is it coming, students? Is it coming now? Are you able to hear? I think now it is fine.